This podcast is sponsored by Steede Motor Group, Claregalway, supplying a wide variety of new and used vehicles. steedemotorgroup.ie, taking the work out of car shopping.
So delighted now to be joined by former Galway senior footballer Gary O'Donnell on the Backdoor GAA Podcast this week, brought to you by Steede Motor Group. Gary, thanks very much for coming on to the podcast. How are you finding now watching inter-county footballer as recently enough retired from the game?
Yeah, quite enjoyable actually, Paul, up to now. I suppose I'm in my second year now of it, so young family at home too, so I'm kept busy and playing a bit of club football. So I've been at the first two National League games, so it's enjoyable to be able to tip around, have the flexibility to get to the games, or do things that you probably weren't able to do when you were an inter-county player. So enjoying it so far now, yeah.
Was it strange at the start going to games?
Yeah, it was. There's no point saying otherwise. It was. Like I said before, I was probably busier than I probably thought I was at home, and things have gone on and in your own life as well too. So even last year, I think that Division 2 kind of went under the radar a small bit, so I probably didn't get as many games as I wanted. But I think this year will be a different story. I'll probably get the games are a bit more appetizing, and I think the 4 home league games as well too. So no, it took a bit of adapting, alright, but nothing major at the same time.
What do you miss most now from not playing inter-county football anymore?
Well, I suppose the one thing I don't miss anyways is the kind of the cold winter evenings out in Loch George and the prep for the games and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing I probably do miss is probably the routine of it, and the kind of the repetition of your weeks and looking forward to games, and this kind of year when you have games coming thick and fast, and the new format as well too, so that you're training on a Tuesday, you're training on a Thursday, and you're gearing towards or priming yourself for a game on a Saturday or Sunday. That kind of routine and challenge, and obviously the teammates and the fun that you have along the way, and the professionalism of it all, it's brilliant. Club football is caught up so much as well too at the same time, but inter-county GAA is the elite of our sport, so enjoyable to be involved in it. And the fact I was there for a good few years as well too, you saw the progression of it through the years. So I miss that kind of professionalism of it, the challenging of, or how every year changed as well too, between diets and training methods and so on and so forth, that that kind of stuff. And then, just as I said to you, the teammates and the camaraderie that you'd have in the dressing room as well too.
You started off in the early noughties, and you mentioned this is your second year retired now. What's the biggest eye-opener of how the game progressed to you?
Probably tactically more than anything, and then S&C, probably the two big things for me. I would have been under Liam Salmon initially. Brilliant coach, absolutely brilliant. All football, modern day analysts and people watching the game would love him now if he was still in the game. But it's so difficult for coaches like that to kind of stamp their authority on games, because the game has evolved so much. There's a lot of teams, if you are playing against a good football side, they'll try and stop you playing that way. So it might be easy on the eye for a lot of people watching it as well. So that type of things, the way the game's evolved, video analysis and so on, is gone through the roof. So the inches are huge. And then the S&C side of things, teams are so physically and tactically, like I said, well prepared. The physique and fitness of some of the players, even if you look at Limerick, the way they've evolved over the years in hurling, Dublin and the 6 in a row team, and the inches and the margins between most of the teams now, that is so small. It's just there can be very little, particularly the latter stages of the league and championship. There's very little between the teams in terms of S&C. They're all doing the same tactics. Small little things like you saw last year in the All-Ireland final, a free can decide a game. It's just the margins are so small in comparison to before.
Just when you mentioned Liam Salmon there and Galway, when you started out, that Galway team, when you look at the early noughties, it was a great Galway team. But do you feel maybe during your Galway career, it took Galway as a county for a while to get up to date with the modern football tactics?
Yeah, probably. Traditionally, we're often referred to as a traditional footballing county, but Kerry are often referred to that as well. But they didn't kind of fall away. They probably coincided too with Mayo probably getting a march on us in the mid tens, we'll say, under James Horn. I think he alluded to it actually recently as well too. He kind of mentioned how they focused in on their S&C during that time, and they felt that they got huge gains on it against us during that time. And he alluded to in the first National League game this year that he feels it was the first time he thinks that he's seen in the last couple of years that we've caught up, and I've been glad to agree with that a bit as well. So probably, we're probably a bit too traditionalist, that we're a bit stubborn in a way that we wanted to kind of play our natural way. And, you know, in any sport, if you're watching any sport now, you need to have a plan A, B, and C really in many cases, and even in that case, it might need be enough to win a game. So, I'd say we're probably left behind that way with a lot of ground to make up. We're probably back at the top table now, but you know, the challenge is now to remain there and be consistent, and to be constantly up in Croke Park and in semi-finals and finals, and, you know, at the latter end of Division 1 as well too. That wasn't the case at the time. We've kind of ebbed and flowed a bit, but the challenge now will be just to stay there.
At that period, you're obviously only starting out, but when you look at the players you had, like Port Joyce, Michael Meaton, the Joe Bergens, Finian Hanleys, it's that frustrating time, because you know you kind of knew the players were there, and like one game that stands out when you went toe to toe with Kerry that day in Croke Park, I think it was 2008, the rain and everything.
Yeah, that was 2008. You're right. Yeah, monsoon season. Michael Meehan, I think, scored 10 points that day. That was, and you know, we probably, no more than what we're saying now, probably should have kicked on after that. Calibre of players that you're talking about there were brilliant. The turnover of managers probably didn't help. Not that any of them were doing anything wrong. It was just the consistency of having a coach, and you know yourself now, with any of the top coaches, they need at least 3 years nowadays to implement anything that what they're doing. You can't really judge them on anything other than that. So all the good coaches now get time. 1 and 2 years probably isn't enough if you want to really kind of progress. So that probably didn't help the turnover of coaches, because every coach came in, had a different philosophy, had a different maybe liking to certain players, and you know, it was just probably didn't help in that time. And then eventually we slid down to Division 2 and stayed there for a few years. Probably didn't help either. And then, you know, we're back up there now, and probably should be by right there for a few years now as well.
The moment that stands out, which I say was probably one of the hardest days in your Galway career to take, against Mayo and Pearse Stadium, 4-16 to 11 points. Was that one of the toughest days?
Yeah, it was. I actually wasn't starting that day, funnily enough. So still at the same time, that was definitely a low. Yeah, 100%. Probably another game that probably stood out for me, I think, was 2010 in Belfast against Antrim. It was one of the last games in Casement Park. I think it was Port Joyce's last game, actually. Yeah. I think we lost by a point or something that day. That definitely goes back in my mind as one of the lowest ones. Yeah, because like we're saying, they were kind of struggling those few years, and you know, we were in the qualifiers for a number of those years, and we were given Division 4 teams chances against us. Even down, it wasn't even 2010. I think up as far as 2014 or 15, Waterford nearly beat us in Pearse Stadium. I think we got a late score or two to beat them. You know, struggling to put the likes of Tip away, those types of things. No disrespect to them, but with the calibre of players that we had and the underage All-Irelands that were won, we needed to be competing better, and that was probably more of a reflection on us as players, that we weren't kind of, you know, putting those games away. But the Antrim one always jumps out of my mind. Just the fact of the magnitude of losing it, and the position we were in during the game as well too. We were leading nearly all the way through and just got caught at the post as well. And the fact it was Porrick's last game too, I'm sure he didn't want to go out in that note either.
What was that kind of period of struggle down to, if you can put it down to one thing? I know you said the change of managers, but even on the field, what was it?
I would have always said there was never a period of time where the players got on the field that were lacking talent and ability, because even during that time, I know we'd won. Paul Connery, for example, won All Ireland, we'll say, in I think it was 06, I think it was. And then I think there was 2 or 3 All-Ireland under 20, under 21s, whichever way you want to call it, in the last 10, 12 years. So it wasn't the case that we were struggling with players coming through. The calibre of players were very good. Not that you needed to be winning All-Irelands, but if you go through a lot of those teams, a lot of them have gone on or maybe didn't last playing long for Galway for different reasons. But turnover of players was probably a big thing. A lot of players that came in and maybe didn't settle for a year or two, were gone. Then another crop were coming in, another batch. Some settled, some didn't, some made it, some didn't. And then, like I said, the turnover of coaches probably didn't help either. That were probably the two obvious things that would jump out for me. Ability-wise, maybe we weren't good enough. That could be part of it, particularly in Connacht against Mayo. Like a lot of those Mayo teams that came through, Parsons, the O'Shea's, Andy Moore, and all of our age group that time would have went toe-to-toe with them underage, and there would have been no gulf in class, for example. So, as I said to you, the S&C, James Horn was with them for 5-6 years as well too. So like I said to you, the consistency of having one coach, one philosophy, knowing what he had to do, a big long-term plan rather than us kind of starting from scratch nearly every November, December probably didn't help.
Did you have to meet as players? Like I'm just thinking of before when Kevin came in, he really did change Galway football. Do you feel as well maybe that he was the style automatically? There was just a perception that Galway turned negative, but every team was doing it. Every team was bringing numbers back behind the ball, but he just seemed to get a bad rep. And when you consider we hadn't won a Connacht title since 2008, and to come in and what he achieved, there was progress every year. Absolutely,
yeah. And I think Kevin did 5 years, but I always think I always put it into context. For example, like when Kevin took over Galway in I think it was 15, we were probably a mid-table Division 2 team at the time. Nowhere near winning the provincial, way behind Mayo, for example. So if you put that into context, whatever way he came in with a style, and it wasn't overly negative, even from a player's point of view. It wasn't a case where he was coming in saying we need to do this. He just wanted to put a bit more shape on us, make us more difficult to beat. Definitely wanted to influence our forward play and make scores. So there certainly wasn't emphasis, I can tell you, from a dressing room point of view or meeting point of view, where we were saying we need to get 12, 13 bodies back. Absolutely not. There was a formation, all right, when we didn't have the ball, that we'd get players back into positions and so on. But definitely a huge emphasis on scoring and playing football as well. So probably as the years went on and we progressed and we won a provincial championship, got back up to Division 1, started competing and beating Mayo. Then again, probably people's expectations rose. And then when that didn't drive on, it probably petered out a small bit. But there certainly wasn't that. As I said to you, the context of it is the big one. Whereas when Pádraig has taken over now, Galway was a more established team. They're a Division 1 team now. The Gulf and class. There's no Dublin, for example, at the table either that are, winning 6 in a row. And we're probably at the same level, if not better, than the likes of Mayo and other teams. So we can compete with them, I'll put it that way. Whereas before, when we came in, Kevin had to kind of bridge the gap, which he did very well, and give us a great footing as well.
What did he exactly do to change, I suppose, Galway progressing that year? Because you think of your first Connacht title since 2008, wins in Croke Park, Super 8s, All-Ireland semi-final, Division 2, and then a Division 1 league final as well.
We spoke about it a minute ago there. Tactics was a big thing.
Yeah.
Actual coaching, a huge amount of coaching, on-field stuff. He'd have a big basketball background. He'd a good bit of coaching run up to that as well too. Huge amount of coaching and structural things on the pitch or off the pitch. An awful amount of homework and research and tactical analysis and so on. Not the case where it was robotic. Sometimes when you look at things now from the outside in, people think that players were robotic. Absolutely not. Even speaking to a lot of lads would appreciate a lot of the coaching they got. They would have liked to have got him even from a younger age. Just things that you're linking in from maybe a basketball court to a pitch and your position on the pitch and your footwork on a tackle, or where you should be when the ball is at a certain side of the pitch. And again, not robotic, just coaching. It wasn't a case where you had a straight jacket on, you had to be here at a certain time. Absolutely not. But just kind of giving your boundaries or kind of giving you ideas of what you should be doing here or what you should be doing there in certain positions. So his tactical analysis and coaching was top class, brought on so many players. We started playing then as a team, and we were first and foremost more difficult to beat. I remember when he came down with Sligo and they caught us, I think twice, was it? One up Markovich Park for a replay and the second one in Pearse Stadium, where they kind of played a similar style as well too, where they left 2 inside and caught us on the break, and we fell for it really. And I remember having brief conversations with him about that at the time, and he saw that opportunity for Sligo to do that at the time, and he exploited it. And that's the kind of tactical awareness and analysis and coaching he brought to the table. And even going down to Cork, I know they got bet in their first National League game, but I'm kind of keeping an eye on their progression too, to see how they're going to go this year. I'd be interested to see can anything be done there with them.
Was wing back your favourite position, that number 5 spot, Gary?
Yeah, I'd say it probably was. Yeah. I played 5 and 6 a lot, but probably 5 was probably my favourite position. Yeah. Anywhere in the half back line really, but probably 5. Yeah.
Do you feel, even with the way inter-county the game has gone, but I suppose in that half back line, it's still an area where you will get that freedom to drive forward?
Oh yeah. It's probably, to be honest, it's probably nearly easier to play as a half back than a half forward now. You're probably getting forward. You're probably getting into some more scoring positions now as a half back than you are as a half forward, because as a half forward you're probably tracking back quite a lot, and you're out on your feet by the time the attack is going the other way. And you might have to sit. So most teams now, they'd interchange wing forwards, wing backs. So wing forwards are coming back helping wing backs, and then when the break happens, the wing back is bombing forward and the wing forward is staying. So wing forward is probably nearly the toughest position, going back to really Brian Doer's days. It's probably the toughest position to play on the pitch, because you probably don't get a huge amount of thanks. You do a lot of donkey work, I suppose. And, if you're not getting on the scoreboard, then people are probably on your back saying, not offering a huge amount. But in most teams, your wing forwards are hugely important in terms of jobs they have to do. But half back line, yeah, it's an enjoyable position. Anywhere in that middle 8, half backs, midfield, and half forwards. You need a huge engine for it, like especially nowadays. There's huge amount of ground covered, 10, 11, 12k, I'd say, in 70 minutes.
Just when you're referencing there some of the games you won under Kevin and with Galway, the championship buzz, like when that comes around, like you, as players, you put in all the work, you're ready to go to war. But like even when you see Galway Mayo games now, is like even the first league game there in Castlebar, would there be, I suppose, an almost itch to say, oh geez, I'd love to be playing that game?
Like last year, the few games I went to, there genuinely wasn't. I totally was at the mindset that I had my time, loads of time there. And the one thing I always said about when I was finishing, it was nice to be able to go when I wanted to go, that I wasn't being shoved out the door or anything like that. Or maybe I was, or maybe I got there before them, but it didn't feel that way anyway. That when I decided to go, that it was on my terms. So there was no bitterness or kind of begrudgery on my behalf. So when I was going to games, I was actually enjoying them, or I was enjoying the way I was kind of living my life then as well too. I was able to do things at home, or do things, go to places maybe that you weren't able to go before. So I was able to enjoy it that way. The first league game down in Castlebar this year, the occasion of it was brilliant, under lights, Saturday night down there, definitely. But then when the game starts, you're kind of thinking, I'm 35 now, definitely I wouldn't be able to stick the pace out in it. So the amount of training and the prep that goes into it is just, sometimes you think that you could maybe get out there and do things, but the reality of it is that the detail that the players are in now, the nick they're in, the work that they're putting in, it's just, you just cannot switch off. You can't just, even with injuries, like I'm even looking at the likes of Damien now being injured, or even Shane being away, or a few other guys that are out, the injuries that Galway have, they're going to need time to be bedded back in, because people expect them to hit the ground running when they're back, but they're going to need a couple of games at least, and a good bank of training under their belt to get up to speed again, because it's just so difficult. The competitiveness of it, the pace and intensity of games is huge now, that you need a lot of work to put into it.
Did you have to think then when Paul came in as manager, were you thinking, like, obviously comes in, it's a new manager, it's a new term, he's going to implement his style? Were you always staying on for a year anyways with Pork, or did you have to think about it before he did come in?
No, I probably, when we got bet by Mayo down in Limerick in whatever year it was, 20, I'm losing track of the years now, and Kevin's last game essentially in the qualifier, I had in my head that time that I was done. That was, I had in my head that year that I was 31 at the time. I said I'd given everything I had. I kind of felt that kind of tenure was coming to the end of its line as well too, that even if Kevin got another year, I wasn't going to stay on, or wanted to stay on for another year, I wasn't going to stay on. And then that was around July time, and then you get the 2 or 3 months off, and come September time, I think, or October time, I think Porrick was announced as coach, and still I was kind of the opinion that I wasn't going back. And then kind of the message kind of went out to regroup, go for a meeting, and I was in it, and I kind of going, I had my 2 or 3 months off. I had the itch. I still felt I was in decent shape, and then kind of slowly but surely came around again. And obviously, first of all, I kind of wanted to know whether I was going to be needed, and then after that, then I kind of made up my mind that I'd love to give it at least another year, and ended up giving it 2, and 100% was as like I said before, clarity in my mind, knowing that your time is done. You've had your time. I enjoyed it so much, and then you can kind of walk off on your own terms then as well. So that was the mind frame at the time. Like I was 33 packing it in. So as I even look at it now, it's a young man's game, even with families and kids and so on. There's very few in the game now that have that are able to do it. It's just difficult with kids.
You see the average age of intercounty footballers getting lower and lower, like in the next few years.
Oh, 100, definitely, yeah, definitely. Like even when I started out, there was a lot of guys in trades, builders, block layers, carpenters, you name it. I can't think of any. There's definitely none in the Galway set up at the moment that are in a trade as a full-time job. Most of them are either students or teachers or other jobs. It's just the way the game is. You just cannot. I can't emphasize the like if someone went out doing a day's work now labouring, they just physically would not be able to, definitely over a period of time, perform to a high level at intercounty level now. So average age definitely coming down. Lifestyle, the whole lot. Like I said, having kids is just not conducive to playing intercounty football. It's manageable, it can be done, of course, but it's certainly far more of a challenge. Average age definitely coming down. I think we'll see less and less players playing into their 30s from now on, unless things change, just because of the demands of it, physically, mentally, on and off the pitch. Yeah.
And even there, you're talking about commitment levels. I don't know how often you were training with Galway. I presume you'd have your 3 or 4 nights, but like, what's that kind of stuff? Maybe even if you're at home one evening, but you're not training, but you're still almost doing some kind of work. Like during that intercounty season, you're never really off it, because that's why so many players, even talking now in the media, talk about like how it's so important to like switch off in the off season.
Correct, exactly. Yeah. I even see the club level now as well too. I see, we know of clarity knowing that the club season isn't starting in Galway till probably August now, I think, this year. So you can see teams now being smart, and players, even at my age, being a bit more cute about when they want to get back on the pitch, because you don't want to be out running on the pitch in December, January, or even February in some cases, slogging away and not having a competitive championship game for 6 months. The body could break down, you could lose interest, and so on and so forth. So timing it and even your training schedule, like even you probably know so Galway with some of the blocks now, maybe there's reasons why they were flat against Roscommon. There could be in a training block there, we don't know. At the end of the day, most of them are gearing towards, well, you want to survive in Division 1 first, and then gear towards a big championship.
Is there specific games around that period that you target?
Training wise, is it?
Like even just looking at the league, like people are talking now that like maybe that some teams don't target that game early on in the year, that you'll start to see more teams targeting games now, like going into round 3, 4, 5, like the latter stages.
No, I don't think so. I don't think any team has the luxury of just targeting a game or saying we'll peak here. Some teams might say we don't want to, or we're not worried about winning in Division 1, but at the end of the day, they still want to win the games 100%. There's none of them saying, even the FBD final, Galway would have targeted that, you can be sure of it, because they know they would have had Mayo in the National League 2 weeks later. Okay, they didn't put out a strong team, but they still would have went all out to win it, and then probably possibly playing them again in the summer as well. So mentally, even you probably want to lay down a marker there as well. But 100%, all teams, regardless of who they are, they're definitely, particularly the football league anyway, how competitive it is, and the layout of it, and then the seeding of it now, and so on and so forth. There's no such game that they'll be saying we'll take a breather here and we'll target these ones. Absolutely, no, 100%. They're going flat out for all of them, you can be sure of it.
Even with Connacht teams there, you're talking FPD and how Galway would have been disappointed to play Mayo. Is that the thing when you're playing Mayo or Roscommon now at this level, that you want to beat them so much to kind of send this message out for later in the summer?
Yeah, it's probably momentum as well. At the end of the day, small and all as it might be, the FPD League final, it's silverware. You're not going to lose sleep over it, of course, but it's silverware, it's momentum, it's confidence. Kevin, when he first came in with Galway, targeted all those games, for example. Not that you're going to be shouting from the rooftop about them winning them or anything like that, but again, it was just to build confidence. And then when you have a coach or a setup, and as small as all silverware might be, there's only 3 trophies you can compete for: FPD, Connacht, and All Ireland in a given year. So even when players start seeing that, it just gels it fairly well, that management and players are seeing that, well, this is working. Confidence is working. You can kind of blend players into that then as well. But even the Mayo Roscommon ones, even though you could put out different players and you have to in those games, it wouldn't be a case where that you'd be overly worried about winning or losing them, but you'd be certainly targeting to win them anyway. You'd be like last year, I think Galway lost their two National League games against Roscommon, and then bet them in the Connacht final, performed very well in the Connacht final, for example. So again, it's not the be all and end all, but it can help at times, yeah.
Just even, Gary, like touching on your career there, we've talked how you went through the lows of Galway football, then to the highs. Is that what, when you look back at your career as a whole, does that make it kind of special that in one way you were there through the tough times and the good times?
Yeah, look, you'd have regrets after a career that you look at. Even the guys that have won multiple All Irelands, you always hear them in interviews saying that, I often hear the Kilkenny guys, the ones that they lost are always the ones they remember. So
would you still think about some games? Oh
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'd often think, like, I think I played in like 7 or 8 provincial finals. We only won 3. So left at least 2 of those behind, at least, probably more. We bet convincingly in 1 or 2 of them, but I think of one of the Roscommon finals that we lost 2 to those actually, but at least 1 of them were we left behind. Other games as well too, that there's games that you're convincingly bet, or you're bet by a superior team, or maybe you didn't perform such and such, but 100% you go back over games, and any player will tell you the same. Even you could have won whatever you wanted to win, achieved whatever you wanted to do, but you'll always think about the games you left behind you, or the performances that you didn't give, and so on.
And would these games just like pop into your head at random stages, like when you could be doing something else like?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. It could be anything random enough, like when you're into sport and you like sport, like maybe like I do. You'd be thinking about it quite a lot. You'd be watching games, and you'd be thinking about games, and you'd be relating it back and so on. But yeah, they would, yeah. Not that they don't consume me. It's not a case where I'm losing sleep over or anything like that. But the competitive side of things, like you constantly be thinking about it, yeah. But again, nothing that would be consuming you, or you'd be getting low or down about it, but they constantly in the back of your head and so on and so forth. Regrets, if you'd want to call them, yeah.
Just as well, like Gary, a lot of people in Galway will be aware of it, some other people might be aware of it, that you do come from Gort, then you play football with Tuamstays. Like when you were growing up, there's obviously a lot of hurling in Gort, but what attracted you to Gaelic football in a predominantly hurling area?
It's probably well documented now. Like my family background would be fairly football orientated. Like both parents from Mayo, my relatives would have played for a lot of football for areas in North Galway and so on and so forth. And then growing up in the late 90s and so on, when Galway football was fairly competitive, but going into the late 90s, into the noughties with those great teams, went to all the games, kind of grew up kind of wanting to replicate their successes and icons and so on and so forth. And that's probably what a lot of it was. And I was kind of always a person that, I'd be very headstrong. If there's something I want, I don't need to be influenced by other people. If I feel I want something or like something enough, background noise, or I don't get sidetracked very easily. So that was the kind of way when I was growing up. And I remember coming back from a lot of games. I think one of the provincial finals in, I know, was it maybe 98 maybe, and I just had it in my head that I'd love to be playing in a game like that. And I knew that even at that age, I think I was 10 at the time, I knew at that age that the possibility of that happening was quite slim, considering the situation I was in. So just kind of found a way, and I wanted a way, and luckily enough I was kind of influenced and guided and coached by a lot of great people, and managed to find a way to do it.
Did a year till Sunday ignite something for you?
Oh yeah, sure. Look at who hasn't seen it. Like what a documentary even to this day. Like I'm surprised no other team has done something since. The way the game is now, I think a lot of people they're battening down the hatches with dressing rooms and coaches and so on. So it's kind of they want outside influences, but it's a wonder something like that hasn't been done since, because brilliant to watch. Like,
yeah, I think it sits well with all Galway people. Probably didn't watch there for everyone leading up to that Kerry game last year. And like, was that a challenge coming from Gort then to play with Twin Stars?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, because the reality was that the bit of football I was playing at that time, it was low level. Like, it was even underage level, it was not a great standard. And the junior football I did play with St. Coleman's then, it was junior B, junior A. So the quality wasn't maybe what I needed to be playing at. And then the step up, initially probably found it somewhat difficult, but again, like I've been saying before, but players come into an inter-county setup now or getting games, it's very difficult to just hit the ground running. New players coming in playing inter-county football, they need time, they need a year's training under their belt at least, maybe in some cases, and they need games and minutes then, and that was the same case with me. And once I got that, I kind of found my feet and took off from there.
Would you like to see football implemented in more hurling areas? Because I think it's been documented this year, even Killian McDade was referencing in Crowell, like they would have done great work in football. I think they would have been won a fail a good few years ago now, but like there's no underage football in that area. It's just hurling. And like Killian McDade is an example, yourself for example, like footballers coming from hurling areas.
Yeah, look, it's every club is different. It depends on the situation there. Crowell would be traditionally a hurling club, obviously, with areas that have growing populations on as well too. That depends on what it is. Some places need to cater for the community. But again, it's a matter of choice. So you could say the same thing about football areas in North Galway. They don't field any hurling, even though there's probably less cases than that. But the GAA is the GAA at the end of the day. It's hurling and football. It should be a united front in that case, and that we should be embracing both codes. I don't ever think that it'll be a case, or should be a case, where one is kind of detracting from the other in any way. It shouldn't be the case. And in most cases, in those places, be it anywhere in South Galway, even if there was a kind of I see Kinvara now we're starting to field an adult team, I don't think it'll eventually, traditionally anyway, it'll come back to hurling. It's like anything else. If hurling was introduced in a football area, they might tip away at it a small bit. It certainly won't detract from the football side of things, or vice versa, in my opinion. And at the end of the day, as I said to you, it's GAA, so both codes should be embraced as much as possible. But again, it depends on the scenario and the situation. In certain clubs, it mightn't be feasible in other places.
There's a benefit to playing both, though, isn't there, from a young age?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. In any, I'd often say to young girls, anyone that I'd be doing the small bit of coaching I'd be doing, you'll always learn something from the different plays now, be it rugby or basketball or soccer or both codes in football and hurling. You'll always pick up something. You'll pick up a little nugget in one bit of information. You can watch them, yeah, all well and good, and you'll probably pick up something from watching them, but from playing them is slightly different. Just the athleticism maybe of Gaelic football, and then maybe I was kind of watching a game there the last day, an underage game. One guy was predominantly a hurler, and his ability to be able to win a free playing football was 100% from hurling. He was able to put the hand up, wrap it around, and every time he did it, the cornerback bought it and grabbed his arm. But it was totally a hurling thing that he brought into football, but very natural at doing it, and linked in both very well.
The commitment and passion you show for Galway football, remarkable, Gary, but I get the sense it's no different for your club, Twin Stars.
Absolutely. Look, I've said it many times before, I was very fortunate to be able to play for Twin Stars, and they've done an awful lot for me. Great people down there, have given me the platform to be able to do what I've been doing. And I was always of the opinion, and that was one of the things with Galway, that when I was playing on, that I didn't want it to be a situation where I was absolutely crocked and I was able to only give a small bit back to Tuam. I wanted to give at least a few years. I'm into my second year now of club football, and I wanted to do at least that, because I felt I wanted to give at least something back, because they gave me the opportunity and the platform to play at the level I did. Fantastic club, brilliant people, huge tradition and culture and history. You know, and I'm enjoying it. I'm, you know, club football now and hurling or GA, whatever it is gone up to a different level. Like I said to you before.
Was that an eye opener when you came back from inter-county football?
Yeah, it can be difficult enough to adapt in the fact that you're training and you're preparing at such a high level, and it's not that you're coming back into a club level and it's a shambles. Absolutely not. But it's certainly a step down in terms of what's expected and so on. So first of all, I found that kind of from a motivating side of things maybe a small bit difficult, but suited me brilliant then, because you know you're training together 3 times a week, but there's certain flexibility in it, and that there's breaks here and there, and you know you have an opportunity maybe, you know, if you were kind of, you know, sore or had some form of an injury, that there was no huge pressure to maybe train every night, even though I probably was at most of the training session, but there wouldn't be a huge emphasis on it, knowing that there's not a huge game coming up for a month or 2 or so on, so you can time it that bit better and so on. And just look at people give out about it now, the club sport or GA isn't as fun as it used to be, but it depends on the club, it depends on the coach. Some places it can be quite serious. You hear a lot of stories. I can certainly say in our setup, it's very enjoyable. The training is top class, the preparation is brilliant, but there's a fun side of it as well too. There's a personal side of it, if you know what I mean. I like that about it. So I'm enjoying it so far now. Yeah.
Is Frank Fox that one thing you want to finish up with?
No more than before the other games we're talking about there. You know, I think I've played in 3 finals now, lost the 3 of them, so it's definitely 1 or 2 of those will be etched in your mind a few times as well. So look, we're not a million miles off it. Any of the teams that have been winning at the last 5-6 years, we've generally played them and have gone toe to toe with them. But look, we need to find a situation where we can kind of bridge the gap a small bit. We're in the chasing pack somewhere, I'll put it that way, and we're not a million miles off it, but you know, a bit of ground to make up at the same time. But the fact no more than Dublin in the inter-county, Corofin dominated there for a long time. My Cullen have come in now. You have Mount Bellew, Salt Taylor probably coming again. So a lot of teams will fancy it as well.
You mentioned Corofin there. When you got over them in 12, psychologically, like, it was huge. And then I suppose they became even stronger after that period. But that was probably one game that was tough to take after beating Corofin, then to come up short against Salt Taylor. Yeah,
it was, yeah. But don't you often see that nowadays? It happened to Mayo against Tyrone, where you have a big victory in a semi-final and then you just come up short in the final. And you know, look at that, was we were bet on no more than a game that you'd be talking about, you'd have regrets over it, but you know, we didn't perform in that final, but we were bet by the better team on the day. The conditions, I remember at the time, there was a gale and a lot of rain in Salt Hill on that. I think it was in October time. But yeah, after a victory in semi-final like that, you kind of places on a high too, because we hadn't been in a final, I think, in a long time. So you know, the club was on a high, people were on a high, big support behind it, and they just came up short in the final then as well. So disappointing enough. The second final, I think we played, that we drew with them. I think we went 2 points up in that in injury time. I'll never forget it. Yeah. And I think time was nearly up. Generally was up. And I remember standing beside Gary Syson, and he turns around to me and says, "You have us. You've us bet," he said. And I turned around, I said, we do not. He said. And next thing, they just had 2 kickouts. I think they won the first one clean and got it free and put it over. And the second kickout, I think, went for a break. But I remember it was just one bounce of a ball where our cornerback came out and he was within a whisker getting his hand to it to catch it, or sorry, his fist, and he missed it. And I think he hit Mike Farr in the head and it was a free, and they put that over to level. So you're talking about margins or inches. If he got his hand to that, we'd have got it turned, and the referee would have blown it up because we'd have been on the attack. So they went on to win. I think that was the 3 in a row they won that time. They went on to win the All-Ireland after that. So you'd be talking about inches and margins and small little bits and pieces. But yeah, I wouldn't say it was luck or that. They were well used to it, and they knew how to get through games like that.
Absolutely,
yeah.
even with Tuam, is like you mentioned about the culture there, and some of the great footballers before yourself, the Stockwells, Sean Purcell, and all that. Like there's Jeff Allen as well, massive like history and culture of some of the greats that have lined out with Tuam.
There is, yeah, and look, apart from myself, I wouldn't be an Indigenous Tuam man, but I've been there for the last number of years. But there's probably been a lack of Tuam players playing for Galway, even at underage level, up to the last 10, 15 years in particular. But the underage system in Tuam has huge work on into the last number of years. So I think that'll be rectified going forward. Now I think we should be, and hopefully seeing more. I know Shea McGlinchey won a minor last year with Galway, which was brilliant to see. Great enjoyment of that, and the club was very proud of him. And but I think going forward now, I think you should see a few more at least, Tuam players being represented underage, and hopefully going forward into senior level. Because I remember a guy always said to me that traditionally in the past, and a man actually from Gordy, he always said all the Galway teams always had a shaman, as he used to call it. Probably a point in it, that there was an influence on it from them, and you mentioned a lot of the names there. So look at going forward as well too. I think the club obviously are doing great work, so hopefully you'll see a few more of them playing for underage of Galway and then on to senior as well.
Did it make it special for you then to play in Tuam Stadium for Galway?
Yeah, look at a lot of lads actually like the ground. I would love to see a situation where the lights get to go ahead and you can have a Saturday night game down there, and just develop and tidy up the place a bit more. Brilliant venue, like atmosphere wise and crowd wise. Anyone that you talk to just loves going to games. They're just logistically and kind of traveling wise, it's a brilliant place to go to. You have the town then right beside it. People can kind of mingle and socialize before and after the game. So yeah, I'd love the situation to be that you're going to be not rocking down there in the next year or two to a Galway Mayo game on a Saturday night under lights. Like you'd probably see 15, 20,000 at it. Like, so that's the kind of situation you'd love to be at it. I always said the atmosphere and so on would be brilliant. But yeah, always love playing it. Just the ground and the aura around it, and you just know when you're playing there. There's that bit of feel about it, that you know where you are and what it's about. So yeah, loved it.
Is there a sense now of wanting to dip your toe into management or anything?
Not as of yet, anyway, because if I was ever to do something like that, I'd want to be finished playing personally, because I'm a person that if I'm at something, I'm at it 110%. And if I was to do something like that, in my opinion, that I'd have to stop playing, and I wouldn't like a situation that I'd be playing and coaching. I think nobody get anything from that, and wouldn't be able to give as much as I'd want. So maybe down the line, it's in the back of my mind. I wouldn't say I'm thinking about it overly, but the forefront of my mind now is to keep playing, that I'm fit and healthy, and I'm able to play, and I want to play generally maybe as long as I can, to a realistic level. How long that'll be, I don't know. But a guy always says to me, you'll be long enough sitting in the stand or not playing. So I'd like to play for another year or two at least, and after that, then maybe if coaching comes my way, great. But yeah, maybe down the line.
Just a few quick fire questions, Gary, just before we touch on Galway Tyrone briefly to finish up. The best player you played with for Galway, who was
it? I mean, a lot of good ones. Probably say I'd probably mention maybe 2 or 3 for different reasons. One would be Paul Choice, just for what he'd done and the personality was, and the ability that he had. From the opposite end of the pitch, then I'd probably say someone like Finian Hanley, for example, for his leadership skills, defensive abilities, everything he did, body on the line kind of stuff. A lad that you just want in a dressing room, that kind of guy. For that reason. And then from a different side of things, might be someone like maybe Michael Meehan. I know his career probably didn't go the way he wanted in terms of injuries, but like in terms of talent, in terms of, again, mentality and drive and leadership, and then ability obviously as well, fantastic player. So there was numerous other ones, even a few of the most recent current players too. I put them in that bracket as well, but you can't name them all.
And your toughest opponent on the inter-county stage?
Sorry?
Your toughest opponent on the inter-county stage?
I'd probably say Declan O'Sullivan. Probably in my earlier years from Kerry, like a lot of people on about the Dublin 6-in-a-row team, and they're a brilliant team and they'll go down in history and so on and so forth. But I always felt they were the sum of their parts. That Dublin team, that strategic or tactically and everything, they were just so hard to play against because they just had no weak link anywhere in the pitch and everyone knew their role. But the Kerry team of the late 2000s, I thought were brilliant. Like the Declan Sullivans, Donaghy, Cooper, the O'Sheas, you name it. But Declan Sullivan was probably the most difficult opponent I had to play against. Speed, he had speed. He was equally as good off his left and right. He had everything. He could kick off his left, kick off his right, solo, the whole lot. Brilliant player, yeah.
What's been the best moment in your football career?
You could probably match-wise, probably when we bet Mayo down in McHale Park in 16, for the simple reason being that we weren't expected to win it. You know, Mayo were looking for 5 or 6 in a row in Connacht at the time. The Gulf and Class was perceived as being
a lot of supporters travelled that night down as well.
No. And they there was probably a reason for that. We probably didn't give them a huge amount of reason to be travelling. Coaches would always say that you're going to have to give the supporters a reason to follow you. At the end of the day, they're paying good money to follow you and so on. So we probably didn't give them a huge amount of reason to do that, but that kind of added to it as well too. It was kind of like a siege mentality going down there. Even my own personal family, they'd often allude to that moment that they went down and what they saw and the excitement after it was just huge. It was just one moment, I think, that kind of tipped the tide a small bit, that we kind of stopped that kind of dominance as such, and that was kind of the turning point really, where you're probably seeing now where Galway are probably competing to the level that they are. Not that was the main point, but it definitely turned the tide where Mayo were the dominant team over us, particularly for the previous 5, 6, 7 years. And then that moment, I think, just kind of stamped their authority in the province.
Just then, Gary, on the Galway senior football this year so far, it's been a draw against Mayo and a narrow 1-point loss to Roscommon. Injuries definitely have seemed to have an impact already on the squad. When you look at the minute, Robert Finnerty, Damien Comer and Patrick Kelly all out for injury. Shane Walsh obviously having a well-earned break as well from Kilmacook Crokes. But it's like if you take 4 forwards like that out of any team, like there is going to be areas that they are going to struggle.
Yeah, 100%. Like that's 4 year starting 6 forwards from last year's All-Ireland final. So that's definitely part of it. And then probably it probably took them, well, they're probably slower getting back together this year, considering the long season they had last year. So they probably haven't had a huge or as long as pre-season maybe as that they wanted. Now, in saying that, like Kerry, I don't think had any of their starting forwards in the final last year in their first National League game. I know they lost, but it is an opportunity to implement other players and so on. And you have Ian Burke back, you have Peter Cook back in, players that are used to playing inter-county football, huge amount of potential and quality. So in one side, I'd be saying, yeah, injuries and so on, and then you're losing 2 starting backs in Liam Silk and Kieran Malloy from last year as well too, so they have to be filled in. So that's kind of 6 key positions that were consistently playing last year in the March All-Ireland. So that certainly didn't help. But whatever about the first game against Mayo, where they played okay, probably should have saw it out, drew it, not the end of the world. Their performance against Roscommon would have been a bit concerning, the fact that they didn't play well at all. But again, it's only one game. The way the break came at the right time for them, 2 weeks, you can regroup, reset themselves, and I'd be expecting them to play a lot better against Tyrone Sunday week.
Is that the way some games in the league can lead? It just seemed one of those cagey games. Like a lot is being referenced in the game at the moment. That, like, we had Sean up to pair on, and he was just talking about that Roscommon game where it frustrated him, where players were getting into shooting positions but not taking on the shots. And that's obviously a way modern football has gone, where possession is just so key.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of saying before about kind of the robotic nature of players now, that lads are coached, but sometimes players are kind of afraid to because at the end of the day there's probably stats and figures beside their name about what they did with and without the ball. So, and that can be the difference between being selected and not being selected. So you don't know what's been going on with coaching. That could be a lot of it. The Dublin, I'm referring to Dublin there a bit. Jim Gavin's Dublin team, you always hear about how they nearly passed you into submission, nearly like Barcelona back in the day, where they didn't shoot unless it was nearly a 90-odd% shot. And that was difficult to play against as well, because you found it very difficult to turn them over. But no, you're right. And even at that Roscommon game, the frustration was that it was just a flat kind of no intensity. Fatigue might be a lot to do with it as well. I know it's only the second round of the league, but like I said to you, a lot of them guys have had long seasons last year. Probably haven't had a huge run into this game as well too. But they would have been disappointed with it, and particularly the way they lost it as well too. Roscommon played a style of play as well where they literally brought everyone behind the ball, absolutely everyone. But again, Galway need to get used to playing against that style and breaking it down. 8 points, I think, was all they scored, so very poor return. And Paul could be very much a guy who's all about kind of getting scores on the board and so on and so forth. So he'd be disappointed with that. But again, look at it's round 2. They have a home game in June against Tyrone next. If they perform well there, as they did the last time, the score they put up, all will be forgotten fairly quickly.
Yeah, this Tyrone game comes at a nice time now, because win this and they nearly put themselves back in contention, because it is Roscommon are on top of the table at the minute with 4 points, Galway on 1. But win this Tyrone game and they'll be right back in contention near the top spots in the National League again.
Yeah, look, and that's the good thing about this game, that there's kind of a somewhat backs to the wall kind of feel to it, that if you're saying if they win it, if they lose it, they're in a precarious enough position where they've only 1 point after 3, and then they're heading to Donegal away. So that's kind of a good thing too, where management will they'll know a bit more about the setup and the caliber and the resilience and character of a lot of the players, particularly a lot of the newer lads that are going to be playing it because of the absentees we've mentioned. So that's kind of a good thing too. Home crowd as well too. Performance needed, win needed, essentially, like you said. As I said to you, I wouldn't be, and I don't think they'll be overly concerned about being at the top of Division 1, but you certainly want to preserve your status there as well anyway. If you get to the top and you can win it, great. But this one is a big one. The fact that you've Donegal away next. If I was looking at the fixtures anyway, I'd be kind of thinking, I think they'll beat Donegal away, and then you've Monaghan at home, but you don't want to be going into the last 2 games against Armagh and Kerry having to win them. I think they could win them, but you don't want to have to win them, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But again, back to the wall for this game slightly. I know it's only round 3, so that's kind of a good thing about it. So you'd expect a bit more of a bite to it, don't you?
And what would be the goal for Galway this year?
Goal for Galway, well, straight up, win All Ireland. They got to the final last year, so you can be sure that the final goal for them is to win the All Ireland this year. Goal number 1, restore Division 1 status. Goal number 2, win Connacht. And goal number 3, then between the All Ireland. That'll be the 3 they'll be talking about in that, probably that order. Looking at the format for the provincial championship, for example, as well, it'll be Galway versus Mayo or Roscommon in a Connacht semi-final, and then I think if Sligo, Leitrim, Roscommon, New York and London awaiting in a final. So there's one huge game there, and probably with the seeding of it now this year with the new format for the championship, there's slightly less of an emphasis on the provincial championship, but you want to win that game to probably have a good seeding going forward into the All Ireland series then.
And is there any new players that you're watching out for this year on the squad to have a breakthrough year?
I'm looking forward to seeing. I enjoyed Jack Glynn last year. I thought he was very deserving of his Young Footballer of the Year. I think he'll be there for years to come. Probably great player. Applicable guys applying themselves well, just solely focused on being an intercounty player and applies himself and trains exactly to that tune. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he'll progress on this year. Then there's not a huge amount of younger guys coming through, but other guys coming back in. I'm looking forward to seeing Peter Cook get back in and seeing what he's going to add. It's been alluded to that, that he's needed back in there, and he has, and the lads in there before him have done very, very well as well too. So again, he's going to need minutes and time as well too to come back in and stamp his authority on games and build his confidence and fitness and so on. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he's going to get on this year and what he's going to add to the team.
Do you expect Galway to get the result this weekend against Tyrone?
Yeah, I do. I think they will, yeah. And now, in saying that, I expect them to beat Roscommon too, but I just think the way things have fallen now, and I do think Tyrone are a dangerous animal now too. I think people are writing them off, and I think they're starting to rally the troops a small bit, and no more than their first National League game, they came out and performed very well in their second round. So they'll know as well too, the last time they're down in Tuam, they got a walloping as well too. So they'll be forewarned. But yeah, I think Galway will. I think they'll perform a lot better. I think there'll be a bit more bite in them. But I fancy them to get a 3 or 4 point win. Yeah.
Yeah, he was hoping for a Galway win this weekend to get themselves back in contention for the National Football League. That is all on our podcast today. Gary, thanks a million for coming on.
No bother, Paul.